Before we start the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. And now, let's go. Story 1. Putting things off was becoming a forte of mine. I could measure my mental decline by watching that spot get bigger and bigger, a dark ring eating through the white paint and bulging drywall, pushing the baseboard over the tile floor. I should have reported it to someone, and I'm sure the landlord legally would have had to clean it. Doing that would have required me to live somewhere else, though, and I wasn't in a place for all that. The first time I saw it, the spot was a dull speckled gray, only about the size of my hand. It looked gross, to be sure, but it was a landlord problem. Besides, my other bathroom was fine. A couple weeks later, when I was feeling somewhat energetic, I went to take pictures to advertise for a new roommate. In that time, it had increased to the size of a dinner plate and had become a deep black in the center. I was concerned, adding it to my mental list of things I should do, but took no steps to complete. The fact that I couldn't get a good picture of the bathroom actually derailed my whole effort at posting for a roommate. Things had gotten worse than I like to admit very quickly after I graduated college. I didn't try to get into any labs as an undergrad, which was a mistake I already regretted. When graduation rolled around, I had no plans. A BS from UCSB was a pretty good degree, but with no connections and a bad job market, I'd sent out a few applications and got 0 responses. My roommate, Kevin, graduated and moved out, leaving me in the townhouse with my cat, Walter. Instead of applying for jobs, I would do a different build in Elden Ring. Instead of cleaning the house, I would binge a new show. Every now and then, I would take a picture of the spot, watching it get incrementally larger, telling myself I would call the landlord. Instead, I closed the door and ignored it, along with all of my other problems. The smell was my first warning that this spot was something more sinister than black mold. I was in the living room, on my old blue futon, which was damaged from 2 of Kevin's friends having pretty intense sex on it one night, when I noticed a stench. It smelled like something dead, but with another foul aroma permeating it. My nose wrinkled when I noticed it, getting up from the couch immediately. Walter begrudgingly hopped off of my lap onto the carpeted floor, whipping his black tail in annoyance. To say that I was bad at cleaning was an understatement. I hadn't vacuumed in months, but I never left anything around that would rot. The sink was clean, the garbage disposal was clean. If the trash stank, I would take it out. I changed the litter box regularly. What was it? I sniffed, moving around the room. There's something primal about tracking by smell. It's a bit of lost art for humans, something we try to leave to other animals. In this case, I had little choice in the matter. My nose took me to the empty side of the house, following a scent that was sour but also sulfuric. I had already formed a hypothesis before opening the bathroom door. I flicked on the light. The mold spot had grown. It looked almost hairy now, next to the shower curtain, and satellite dark splotches were popping up on the other wall and ceiling. In a futile gesture, I covered my mouth with my hand, as if it could offer a degree of protection. Walter slipped in between my legs, and, ignoring the mold spot, began to avidly sniff at the cabinet under the sink. I shooed him back out the door, earning a meow of protest. I was reaching for the cabinet when I heard something moving inside of it. Freezing in place, I held my breath. It was a sort of scraping sound, so faint I could barely make it out. Hovering with a turned ear, it came back. Asterisk scratch. 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 Asterisk had happened every few seconds, regularly. Part of me wanted to leave. Part of me wanted to get some sort of weapon and come back. Instead, curiosity got the best of me, and I opened the white cabinet door. There was something dark, pressed into the plywood where the pipe went down. Turning on my phone flashlight, I gasped. What I had thought was a scratching noise was the belabored breathing of a very, very sick rat. It lay on its side, with all 4 legs sticking out limply. The tiny brown chest heaved up and down, desperately clinging to life. It seemed to have some kind of wounds on it. Next to it were 2 other rats, already dead. They had spots of black mold on them. It's impossible to say whether pity or disgust was prominent in my mind, but I took action. Thanks to COVID, I had N95s lying around and put one on, as well as a pair of nitrile gloves. I put the dead rats in a trash bag and the living one into a freezer bag. I double bagged that and put the rat in the freezer to kill it. I don't know if that was the best way, but it was the best I could think of. I sprayed bleach solution under the sink and also on the mold spots, turned the fan on, and left. I washed the hell out of my hands and took a shower in my bathroom, scrubbing myself all over. Somewhat rattled by the ordeal, I drank a couple of beers, watched some of Chernobyl, and fell asleep on the couch. My intention was to call the landlord the next morning, but I got an email from an environmental assessment company asking if I could do a phone call sometime that day, and it distracted me. The call went pretty well, and they set up an interview. That small success was excuse enough for me not to address the mold problem for another day. I hoped that I could stop burning through the small savings I had and actually get an income. I had gotten lucky buying Bitcoin about 10 years back, but I'd spent most of it already. I was giving Walter dinner when he hissed and swiped at me. Before I knew it, blood was dripping from 2 small gashes on my hand by my little finger. I might have been angry if I wasn't in shock. Walter never acted like that. I told him he was a bad kitty firmly, then went to wash my hand. As I gently cleaned the cuts with soap and warm water, I noticed something. Right next to my wrist bone, the part you can't really see normally, there was a black spot. I scrubbed at it reflexively, thinking of the mold in the bathroom, thinking of the mold on the rats. Panicking, I just scrubbed harder and harder. Eventually, the little circle began to fade and then disappear. After a couple minutes, there was only pink, exfoliated skin. Had I gotten something on my hand and not noticed? Sharpie, or some kind of food. Nothing seemed to fit what I had seen, except the mold. Again, I told myself I would call the next day. Get this taken care of. It didn't matter if I would have to find somewhere else to go for a few weeks. It wasn't safe to live like this. I took another shower, drank more beers, and tried to watch a show to calm down. Little by little, a headache began to bother me. I poured the rest of my beer down the sink and got a glass of water. It was almost midnight. I didn't need another. On the futon, I wrapped myself in a blanket and settled back in, trying to relax. I was cold and went to get another blanket from cupboard. Before I got there, I checked the thermostat, which was at 75. Instead of getting a blanket, I got my thermometer. My temperature was 99.9. Not terrible, but definitely not normal. My heart was beating a bit fast, and I clocked my pulse between 90 to 100 BPM. I was definitely sick, and I was really hoping that it wasn't from the mold. I never looked up what that stuff does to you, but I figured I would rather have a cold or even the flu. It occurred to me to go to urgent care, but it was the middle of the night, and I was so tired. If I didn't feel better by morning, I would go then. Bringing a glass of water, I put it on my nightstand and tucked myself in. Walter approached timidly, but I called out his name, and he hopped on the bed, sitting on my stomach and purring. Pretty soon, I was asleep. I awoke in confusion, with the light still on. Walter was hissing loudly, and I flinched a bit, worried he might swipe at me. Instead, he was facing the bedroom door. I told him to hush, and he let out an angry growl, but did go quiet. My headache was definitely worse, and I rested my head back on the pillow. I heard something, or thought I did. It was hard to tell, since it sounded like me or Walter shifting in the sheets. Holding perfectly still, I heard again more clearly. It was a dull, distant sound, just loud enough to be perceptible. Walter's ears tilted to listen. His head held statue still, pointed to the doorway. It came again, faint but undeniable. I sat up in bed and listened. There it was, but what was it? Maybe being sick was making me paranoid. Regardless, I didn't think I could go back to sleep without finding out. I stood and tentatively walked to the door toward the dark hallway. Pausing, I could hear more clearly. Closer to it now, an unwelcome thought came into my mind. This sound, which kept happening at regular intervals, reminded me of a rat, struggling for breath. But this was much louder. I tiptoed down the hall, taking one barefoot step at a time on the carpet, completely silent. When I reached the hall to the other bedroom, to the other bathroom, I could hear it over and over. A sort of scraping. Instead of going toward the sound, I snuck into the kitchen. My dad had bought me a knife set, which fit into a wooden block. They were still very sharp, since I never cooked. I looked at the handles, from a small paring knife up to the largest butcher knife. Picking a handle, I drew the blade out ever so slowly. The boning knife. Its tip came to an acute point, making it the best for stabbing, rather than slashing. I made my way back to the hallway, knife in my trembling hand. I could hear the sound, a sort of grinding, rattling noise. My foot went out, pressing into the carpet. Then the other foot. Step by step, I approached the closed bathroom door, not daring to turn on the hall light. In the darkness, the sound got louder, more clear. I still couldn't tell what it was, what could possibly come from. My heart pounded in my aching skull, and I blinked over and over to try and see better in the dark. The small brass handle was before me. I could hear the sound well now, even though it was muffled in a way. It might have been coming through the wall, I wasn't sure. Perhaps a raccoon or other animal was digging at something outside. There was no way to tell. If I was going to find out, I had to open the door. I can't tell you why, but I swung the door open like I was going to stab an intruder. Knife clutched in my sweaty palm. I stood completely still, looking at an empty, moldy bathroom. There was nothing there. I flipped on the light and saw that the mold had gotten much worse, causing lumps in the wall where flaps of paint hung limply. The sound stopped as I stood frozen for what must have been a full minute, not hearing anything at all. I checked under the sink, still seeing nothing. At some point, I realized that I didn't want to be in this room, breathing the mold. I was about to turn and leave when I saw something dark and moving. I yelped. It scared the hell out of Walter, who had crept in the open doorway behind me. Letting out a sigh of relief, I closed the bathroom door but left the light on. Walter sniffed under the door for a minute, but followed me back to bed. The headache was bad, so I took some painkillers for that and the fever. I put the knife on my nightstand by the water, lay back down in bed, and closed my eyes. It was only when I heard Walter howling that I realized I had fallen asleep. If you've ever heard a bad cat fight at night, it sounded like that. Visceral, intense. If it wasn't coming from inside my house, I wouldn't have known Walter could even make such a noise. I grabbed the knife and sprinted down the dark hallway. There was no doubt in my mind where I had to go. When I turned the corner, a deep terror washed over me. The dark hallway was illuminated by the light of the bathroom. The door was open. I heard another cry, sounding somehow more distant, and ran up to the doorway, shaking with adrenaline, brandishing the knife in front of me. There was nothing there. No intruder, no Walter. Instead, there was a hole in the drywall, a hole that had partially caved in the tile flooring, completely covered in black mold, leading downward into the ground. In the soft, moldy paint, I could see claw marks where Walter had been pulled in. https://www.reddit.com/r/Patrick Mullins author /comments /1kern3o/Patrick_Mullins_written_work. Story 2. I'm a volunteer psychologist in a war zone, but I'm not writing this as a therapist right now. I'm writing this as someone who, for the first time in a long time, is truly afraid. The shelter where I'm working sits atop a hill of red earth, an old structure that seems to bleed when it rains. They say the house was once owned by a wealthy landowning family, then a field hospital. Now, it's run by a European NGO that takes in children displaced by civil war in small Eastern European regions. I've been here for just over 2 months. There are 3 shared dorms, a makeshift consultation room, where I also sleep, a basic kitchen, and a large basement where we store supplies and some files no one seems to want to touch. The house groans at night, like wood in pain, just like its guests. During the day, things are almost normal. The children draw, play what they can still call play, and sometimes they even forget about the war for a few minutes. It's absolutely heartbreaking to see such young children not spared from witnessing things that would shatter most adults. I couldn't just sit and watch this happen. It felt noble, important, even life-saving. That is until the boy arrived. He came this past Monday, brought in by soldiers from the Northern Army. No documents. A wet backpack, caked in dry earth. Eyes too knowing, silent. The nurse tried to speak to him. So did I. Nothing. He just grabbed a piece of paper with his small, dirty fingers and wrote a single word. Below, no punctuation, no emotion, no capitals. He just pushed the paper toward me and kept staring over my shoulder like something was behind me. And that's what he's done ever since. He walks silently through the house, draws with obsessive intensity, and writes that same word, below. The volunteers started calling him the pit boy. But he listens. I see it. He listens very well. And that's why I avoid any jokes or nicknames. My routine with him started simple. Passive observation at first, then short sessions in the office, even if he didn't speak. Slowly, we gather more information. He was the only survivor of what they're calling a asterisk rural cleansing. Asterisk, his village was wiped off the map, the bodies left to rot in the streets. He was found inside a dry well. I had to fight back tears every time I looked into his eyes. The first time he drew in front of me was during our 4th session. He sat still for 20 minutes, then pulled out his notebook and drew the outline of a large, deep hole in shaky, spiraling lines. At the center, a dark spiral. Around the hole, hands. Lots of hands. Some looked like children's. Others, far too large. He looked at me, and once again, tears welled up. What had this poor soul seen in that pit? Were the enemies tormenting him? Had he listened to everyone he loved being killed while he hid underground? Then he wrote the same word in the corner of the paper. Below, I forced a smile. I told him he could draw other things. I told him he was safe here. He just pushed the paper toward me again, harder this time. The worst part happened last night. There were light footsteps in the hallway downstairs, even though everyone was asleep. I woke up with Ramirez, one of the NGO workers, our bodyguard, covering my mouth. My heart nearly exploded until I realized it was him. He motioned, "Sage," and I nodded. "What's wrong?" I whispered. "There's an intruder downstairs armed." A chill shot on my spine. All I could think about was the children. What this man might do. If he was alone. If maybe death wasn't even the worst he could bring us. Ramirez interrupted my spiral of thoughts by handing me a gun. He had another in his own hand. "I'm going down. If you get a clear shot, even if I'm in the way, don't hesitate." I couldn't answer. He just cracked open the office door and stepped out. I followed. We crept down the stairs carefully, sweeping the space for movement. Nothing. Just dead silence. Until, passing the kitchen entrance, something leapt from inside. A shadow. It fell onto me. I felt the barrel of a rifle press into my neck. All I could see was the glint of a helmet as a thick-accented voice shouted, "Where is he?" Where's that word I couldn't understand. I know it only lasted a few seconds, but for me and for my neck, it felt like forever until Ramirez fired. The man dropped, lifeless, blood spreading fast across the floor. We could already hear footsteps upstairs. The kids were waking up, and the nurse scrambled to get them back into their rooms before they saw the mess. "Shit," I said, rubbing my throat. "Any more of them?" "No," my colleague replied. "Just this one. Seems like he was after the—" His voice trailed off. I turned to see what had stopped him. There he was, standing on the stairs. The boy from the pit. We both froze, unsure how to react. "Hey, buddy," Ramirez said gently. "It's late. Go back to your room, okay?" The boy's eyes were wide, glassy. While they tried to soothe him, I noticed something. The wounded soldier was still moving, barely. His eyes darted around wildly. Not at us, at the boy. I saw his hand reaching for his weapon, and I swear it wasn't a choice. It was faster than thought. I shot him, again and again, until the bullets ran dry, until he stopped moving while the boy watched in silence. As soon as I came to my senses, I dropped the weapon, stunned. I mumbled a faint goodnight and ran back to my office, where I collapsed into sobs. This morning, one of the caretakers said she found the boy outside in the garden, on his knees, digging with his bare hands. The ground was dry, hard. His fingers bled from the nails, but he kept digging like it was urgent. When I approached, he stopped. His knees were scraped, his body covered in soil. Then he started writing again, but this time on his own arm with a bloody finger. Below, my stomach turned. That's why I had to write this somewhere, to not lose my grip. Because ever since then I've started hearing sounds. The shelter is silent, but I can't focus, and it's not the coffee. It's that feeling, like something underneath us is moving. I got up. I slowly made my way down the wooden stairs. The pale sun slipped through the windows, carried by a freezing breeze. As I passed the basement, I swear I heard something. A tiny voice, whispering one word that I know what it said because it repeated it twice. It said, "Mommy?" I froze. It couldn't be. I know that voice. And God help me, It's tearing me apart. It was wet, like it came from underwater through a diving mask. I didn't go in. Not today. I won't. I closed the door quietly and went back to my room. And there on the floor, I found a new drawing. I don't know how it got in. The door was locked. But the paper was there. It was the same hole, but this time someone was kneeling at the edge. No face, just long brown hair, like mine. And below her, hands. So many hands reaching up. And in the corner of the paper, something new. Not the word asterisk below. Asterisk, but a full sentence. In childish handwriting, she's going down too. I'm a psychologist. Scientific. Rational. But now I've locked my door from the inside and dragged the cabinet in front of it. Because I hear footsteps in the ceiling. And through the peephole, I can see the boy, sitting in the hallway, staring at me. Not blinking. Not moving. His hands covered in dirt. And smiling. Story 3. I came to this town 2 weeks ago for a work assignment. The company I work for sent me here for 6 months. Officially, to oversee the process. In reality, I was just supposed to be a guy on the ground. Present. The production facility was outside the city. It took a little over 30 minutes by bus to get there. A massive, closed-off complex, surrounded by a green zone, a buffer between it and the rest of the world. The town itself was off. Gray. No crowds. No youth. The people were polite but dulled, calm in a way that felt almost unnatural, like a wax museum that never melted. I rented a room in a quiet private home. The landlady was tidy, quiet, and almost never asked questions. What struck me was that almost none of the locals worked at the factory. Everyone I met there was from somewhere else. They'd also been sent in, some for a month, some for a season. Locals stuck to renting out rooms, fixing things, running small stores. It was like they avoided contact with the plant, even though it clearly paid for most of the town. It felt odd, but I had no reason to ask questions. The pay stunned me, higher than I'd expected. At first I thought I'll finish my 6 months, go home, and forget this place. But something about the rhythm pulled me in. Not the town. It felt cold, cardboard, unreal. But the rhythm of the factory. We worked in shifts. The schedule was strict but simple. Shift, sleep, canteen, shift. There was a strange calm to it. Time moved differently. Everyone kept busy. The kind of busy where no one makes eye contact. Where silence is part of the job. About a month before my term was up, I met the new floor supervisor. He'd just arrived. A real field commander type. Sharp, fast, no small talk. But he appreciated how I worked. Genuinely. One night, after a shift, we stayed behind in the break room. Someone brought a bottle. We talked. And he said, "Stay longer. The guys are good. The money's better. I'll cover your shifts. We'll backdate the paperwork. If no one asks, no one knows." I laughed, but I didn't say no. The next day, I didn't go home. Technically, HR should have known I was done. But the system listed another 2 weeks for wrap-up. And in a place like this, with hundreds of temps, no one checks unless something goes wrong. So I stayed. Just a little longer, I thought. A month, maybe 2. Until autumn. I didn't know that autumn wouldn't end. Not really. One day I caught a smell. Not smoke. Not garbage. Raw meat. That first time, I was just walking down the street. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Then I turned into the courtyard of an apartment block and saw a coffin. They were carrying it out. The smell was strongest there, and it felt like I was the only one who noticed. Once the coffin was gone, the smell vanished. Now and then I caught it again. Always near something. An ambulance, a funeral van, the hospital gates. And then came a man on the bus. I didn't see him board. I was sitting by the exit, half asleep, when I felt a hand grab my shoulder. Cold, thin, bony, like a skeleton's. He wore a heavy antique ring. I tried to shout, "What are you doing?" "Let go." But nothing came out. I was frozen. He stared at me. No emotion. No words. The other passengers didn't react. Didn't even blink. When the bus stopped, he stood up, stepped off, and walked down the street. Only when he turned the corner and disappeared between the unmoving figures ahead. I could breathe again. I could move. I told myself it was a one-off. Sleep deprivation. Something rational. But then it got worse. The next day, I was in a minibus after a night shift, barely staying awake. Then I saw the car. It passed us quickly. And there, standing on its roof, was a woman, completely naked, skin pale, almost gray. Her hair was braided into a single, long plait, long enough to drag across the trunk. She didn't move, didn't sway, didn't hold on, just stood there like gravity didn't apply to her. No one reacted, except me. The car passed and vanished into traffic. I almost jumped out after it. A day later, I saw her again. On the news. Same car, same make. Crash. Everyone dead. After the crash, I stopped taking the minibuses. I started walking instead, even though the factory was far. An hour on foot, sometimes more. But I couldn't sit there anymore, surrounded by those faces that didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't even breathe properly. They looked like figures, like something had already taken them, and their bodies hadn't gotten the message yet. I tried talking to someone about it. An engineer. We'd worked in the same section since day one. Good guy. Down to earth. A dry sense of humor. No drama. When I told him about what I'd seen, he just stood there, silent at first. And then he said, quietly, "Don't look," and walked away. The next week, he was gone. Just gone. Someone else was listed in his spot. I asked our shift supervisor. His term was up, he said. But the guy told me himself he'd be staying until October. It was only August. I went to check HR. They couldn't find him. Not in the logs, not in the system. Like he'd never been there at all. That's when I started to get it. The ones who see, they don't last long. The ones who stay quiet stay longer. Much longer. One evening, I passed the factory gates. I wasn't working that day, just walking. There was a service bus parked by the entrance. Empty, except it wasn't. Someone was sitting inside. Alone. I couldn't see the face, just a silhouette. I stepped closer, and then I saw him. The man from the bus. The one with the cold hand. He was sitting completely still, like a wax figure. And then, he looked right at me. The bus doors were closed. But I heard it clearly. A voice. "You're here now." And the street lights flickered off. I woke up in my room. I couldn't tell if it had been a dream or something else entirely. I couldn't take it anymore. I want to see the one person I trusted, the same supervisor who'd once asked me to stay. He listened, didn't interrupt, just waited until I was done, then asked, "How long have you been here?" I had to think. Well, 3 months past my term, plus the 6 about 9. He nodded. "Go to the infirmary." I already called. The doctor was old but agile, firm hands, sharp eyes. He spent a long time checking my lungs, my pupils, my pulse. Then he sighed. "You should have been discharged. Your contract ended. Everything you did past that. You weren't supposed to be on the schedule." I didn't get to reply. He was already on the phone. "Bring a car." Immediately. 10 minutes later, it arrived. Black. Unmarked. They didn't say a word. Just put me inside and drove. We went far. Out of town. And then farther still. It was a clinic, not a psych ward exactly, but something in between. Private. Guarded. Barbed wire. Steel doors. There they explained it all. Hallucinations. Vapor exposure. Toxic accumulation. Delayed effect. No lasting damage. No permanent condition. Just rehabilitation. They kept me there for 3 months. During that time, I saw nothing strange. But I was warned, strictly, not to mention what I'd seen. They told me if I started spreading delusions among the others, they'd transfer me to a dedicated facility. I agreed to everything. I just wanted out. When I was released, I went home. I never tried contacting anyone from the factory again. There were no smells, no stares on public transport. The streets looked normal. Sleep came easily, but I still don't know what happened. What did I really see? Was it real, or just part of what they remove from you once you stay too long? I still don't know if there's something wrong with that town or with me. Story 4. I'm not the kind of person who scares easy. I've worked night shifts, done backcountry solo hikes, even spent a year volunteering at a crisis hotline. But what I saw 2 nights ago, I still don't have words for it. I've tried calling friends, trying to explain, but every time I start, I feel like I'm unraveling. So I'm writing it here. Because if I don't, I'll start to believe none of it happened. That's how it gets you. It started with a shortcut. I was driving home after visiting my mom. Small town, middle of nowhere, 2-hour trip through winding mountain roads. It was late. Foggy. My phone was at 4%. The GPS cut out 10 minutes after I lost signal, and I missed a turn somewhere. I figure I just backtrack. That's when I saw the old wooden sign nailed to a pine tree. Miller's Path, logging trail, no through road. I'd heard of Miller's Path before. My uncle used to tell stories about it when I was a kid. Said it was an old lumber route from the 40s. Abandoned. Leads to nowhere fast, he'd say. Don't go trying to find shortcuts through bones. I thought he was just being dramatic. I turned onto the trail. The road was barely wide enough for my car, rutted dirt, tree branches clawing at the windows, fog so thick I had to crawl forward at 5 miles per hour. Every so often, I thought I saw lights through the trees. Flickers. Nothing steady. Just enough to make me feel like I wasn't alone. Then the engine sputtered. No warning. No check engine light. Just a lurch and a sound like someone inhaling through wet cloth. Then silence. I tried the ignition. Nothing. I checked my phone, dead. No signal. No bars. No battery. That was when I heard it. Not an animal. Not wind. Music. Faint like an old phonograph. Tinny and distant. A woman's voice, slow and warbling. Let the pine be your cradle. Let the moss be your bed. I thought maybe someone lived out here. A cabin, maybe. A ranger station. So I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out. The forest was too quiet. You don't realize how much noise trees usually make until they don't. No rustling. No crickets. No wind. Just the sound of my boots in the dirt and that voice getting louder. I followed it. The path twisted deeper through the trees. The fog didn't let up. In fact, it got thicker like it was clinging to me. My skin started to itch. My throat felt dry. The deeper I went, the more I felt like I was being watched. That's when I saw the house. 2 stories. White paint peeling off in long, curling strips. A porch sagging in the middle. Windows too dark for the light coming from inside. And there was light. Candlelight. Flickering through the cracks in the shutters. The front door was wide open. The song was louder now, echoing from inside. The roots will rise, and the worms will feed, I called out. No answer. So I stepped inside. The air was wrong. Heavy. Wet, like stepping into a storm cellar that hadn't been opened in decades. The wallpaper was rotted, curling at the seams. Floorboards bowed underfoot. But everything else looked untouched. Not dusty. Not abandoned. Lived in. There were shoes by the door. A coat hung on the rack. A tea kettle whistled softly on a wood-burning stove in the kitchen. I stepped into the living room. That's when I saw her, sitting in a rocking chair, facing the window. Pale blue dress, hair long and tangled. Her skin looked wrong, too thin, almost translucent, like wax held over a flame. The song was coming from her mouth, but her lips didn't move. Just that voice, slow and distant. Close your eyes and lay below, where time forgets and shadows grow, ma'am. I asked. She didn't turn around. Then the chair stopped rocking. Just froze. The song stopped too. I was about to turn and leave when she finally spoke. Not with her mouth. The words weren't sound. They were inside my head like pressure behind my eyes. You weren't invited. Every hair on my body stood up. I stepped back. The floor groaned beneath me. Then the walls breathed. I swear to God, they inhaled, bulging outward, the wallpaper pulsing like skin. The lights flickered, and shadows poured from the corners like spilled ink. I turned and ran, but the door was gone. Just wall. Seamless. I spun, trying to find another exit, but every window was bricked over from the inside. The house had changed. Grown. The furniture was gone now. The floorboards under my feet writhed like they were alive. Then I heard the footsteps. Not hers. Something heavier. Dragging. From the stairs above. Each step groaned with the weight of whatever was coming down. I ducked into the hallway, heart slamming against my ribs. Found a door. Slammed it shut behind me and clicked on the flashlight. It didn't help. The room was lined with mirrors. Floor to ceiling. Dozens of them. But none showed me. They showed versions of the room, but not me. Other people. Standing alone. Each one pale and shaking. One was missing a hand. Another bled from the eyes. One looked almost like me, but older. Tired. His eyes were wrong. Flat. Then they started to move. Not the mirrors. The people inside them. They all looked up at once. And smiled. That's when I heard it again. Sleep now, child. Beneath the pine, it was behind me. I turned. The woman from the chair was in the room now. But her mouth still wasn't moving. Her face It wasn't right. The longer I looked, the less sense it made. Her features swam. Eyes where her cheeks should be, too many teeth, no nose. She reached for me with arms that were too long. I threw myself against the nearest mirror. It cracked, but didn't break. The version of me inside stared back. Mouth something. Wake up. I slammed the flashlight against the glass. The mirror shattered, and the wall behind it opened. I ran. The house didn't fight me this time. Doors opened where they hadn't been before. Stairs led downward instead of up. I don't know how long I ran. Time didn't make sense. Everything smelled like rust and old milk. When I finally burst out into the forest, the fog was gone. So was the house. No sign of it. No foundation. Just trees. I ran back to the road. My car was there. Still cold. Still dead. But it was real. I sat inside and waited for morning. When the sun came up, the engine started on the first try. I drove until I hit signal and called my uncle. He listened. Didn't interrupt. When I finished, all he said was, "What did the pine smell like?" I didn't answer. I already knew he'd been there too. I don't know what that house is, or why it let me leave. But last night, I found something in my apartment. A scrap of wallpaper. It smells like soil. And this morning, my hallway was 2 feet longer than it should be. I measured it. Twice. I think the house came with me. And I don't think it's done yet. Story 5. I live just on the edge of the small town that my family and I have called home my whole life. The town's welcome sign is just a stone's throw away from my front porch. Yet, we are not far away from civilization as you may think, as we have neighbors close by on either side, and the center of town is only a short walk away. The perfect center of mundane, with no real room for something odd or outlandish to lurk beyond the gaze of the public. So, when I went on my second walk of the summer after finishing a semester of college, you can likely guess what passed through my head when I saw a bike lying innocuously outside the entrance to the old abandoned house. Someone most probably tossed it cause they had outgrown it, or some kid is playing nearby. Now, generally, I would agree and not have paid much credence to the all too mundane sight. However, I remember hearing my neighbor make a call to the police about some teens trying to swipe a few things from inside the house. Given the size of the bike, I also figured the kid was quite young, only about 9 to 12, so I figured it was better that I scare him off instead of making a big scene of something I didn't view as a big deal. At the very least, it offered an avenue to something more exciting than the monotony I had become accustomed to. I stepped past the gnarled hedges that had long grown wild and feral from disregard and into the front lawn of the house. From there is what used to be a driveway, but was now a patchwork of loose gravel, grass, and moss. The other side led to a small fountain next to the house, though I had only trekked over to it once with my brother over the winter as the wild grass grew higher than our knees, and neither us wanted to be preyed upon by a stray tick. I stood there in the middle listening and looking for any sign of life, but there was nothing. Since I had come all this way, I might as well follow the gravel driveway and head toward the garage. I had always figured it was the easiest way to slip by, and the point of entry was that the estate sale was held after Dr. Lowe, the previous owner, had passed away. On the side of the house sat 2 old sliding wood garage doors, and to a weird mix of sorrow and glee, I could see a broken-off chunk of the panel, damaged by years of wear and tear, moved to allow someone to potentially gain access. I felt torn by law. I knew I couldn't enter the building as currently the property was owned by Dr. Lowe's wife, much to the chagrin of me and many of our neighbors. The house became a whitewashed tomb, its weathered Victorian walls masking the true rot and decay the house had long suffered. Even if it was in the vein of getting out another trespasser, it would still be trespassing. The house's rotten interior was also a factor. If it was hurt in there due to going through a floorboard or something falling on him, there wasn't much time for me to be screwing about out here. After a brief second mulling it over, I decided to take a look inside from the windows and call out to see if someone would come out. If I didn't hear or see anything in there, I'd chalk it up to the bike being abandoned and my little investigation, me chasing a non-existent goose. The garage doors were at eye level with me, but were cloudy with dust and grime. However, I could still make out vague shapes of strewn about old furniture and other objects laid haphazardly about. I called a few times, banging on the garage door to see if that provoked a reaction, but nothing stirred. Wanted to at least be thorough and not leave any nagging questions. I figured I might as well kneel and peek through the hole, just to make sure there wasn't any low near the door. I couldn't see from the window. I wish I hadn't, as by the time I'd just gotten down on my hands, I could already glimpse dark red stains that splattered the concrete. A violent rush shot through my body as, by reflex, I sprang back, nearly collapsing onto my side. This, however, only showed me more of the real carnage that had been wrought. The kid was dead. His face was pale, with green eyes that held nothing but a hollow sorrow. His face was stained with streaks from tears that etched down his jaw into his neck. The nape of his neck was marred red with dark chunks torn out, a pool of dried blood forming a small basin around where it must have poured from the vicious wound. His body was laden with dirt and gashes. I could barely muster words, only discordant sounds that made my throat raw. Whatever killed him, I know it wasn't swift, but a fleeting struggle against. What? The shock and fear that had enthralled and muted my alertness released as my situation dawned on me. Where's the thing that did this? My mind raced as I poured through my recollection of local fauna. A black bear seemed the most likely culprit, as the only species of great enough bulk and size to do this kind of damage alone. But there was still the pressing matter of where it was. Had it gone? Was it still lurking? My breath quickened as my pulse raced, as my senses heightened to grasp my field yet. Before I could pick myself off the ground I had been tethered to, processing the shock. A sudden, deafening bang erupted from the garage beside me. I sprang back in shock, finally getting my feet back beneath me as my eyes fixated on where the sound had originated. I could see the large, dark eyes of a dog-like creature staring blankly at me. Its face was bony with a long snout, and it had its front legs, of which I could make out were slim, but ended in large paws that were roughly the size of my hand. Time crawled to a halt in the small eternity the two spent in our visual gridlock. Its expressionless, void-like eyes transfixed with sinister curiosity of how its new target would try to flee paralyzed my legs as I stayed in the low crouch, jumped to earlier. I felt like a rabbit peering down the muzzle of a fox, praying by some miracle it survives. Snap, the old wood giving slightly under the steady weight of the dog-like creature. Resounding like a shot from a starter's gun, dispelling the chilling tension as a hot wave of adrenaline coursed through my veins, propelling me out of the insulted wilderness of Dr. Lou's house and back to civilization, as I could hear the desperate scramblings of the beast. Desperately clawed to break out from its dwelling and rend my flesh with its teeth. Fortunately, I was all too familiar with this side of the Lou property as I shot through one of the gaps in the gnarled hedges, breaking free into the driveway of house that lives on the opposite side of the Lou property, and made my way to the sidewalk, quickly checking for traffic on the interstate that cut through the heart of town before crossing over. Once across, I finally looked back to see if it had taken the risk to follow me out of its sheltered haven. But it didn't. Instead, I could see it, this time in full view, watching from the entrance into the yard. Its face and eyes were still hollow and expressionless, yet it exuded a deep, unsated desire to hunt. I quickly called the police while I watched its movements, moving back towards my house while still on the other side of the street. It watched me for a while before eventually disappearing once again behind the hedges. I told them of the grisly death of the child, and that the large, unknown animal that did it was still active and dangerous there. They arrived after a good 10 minutes, sirens and blue lights blaring as they inspected the area and recovered the boy's remains. I asked them if they had found and killed whatever it was, but no dice there. Told me they searched as much of the building as they could, but couldn't find the creature. They did, however, find traces of fur and what looked like the making of a den in the basement of the house, and planned to set up some cameras to watch for when or if it comes back. Down the road, I could see the kid's family, who were all deep in shock and grief, seeing the state in which their precious son was. Lifeless, cold, with all semblance of vitality drained from him. I thought about how, if I were more proactive in my wanderlust at his age, would I too have a similar fate? I don't think so, but then again, I never imagined a monster could be lurking so close to civility. Story 6. I haven't talked about this in years, not even to my therapist. But I'm writing it down now because last night at 2:12 a.m., I heard the knock again. Same rhythm, same pause, the same sick feeling crawling up the back of my throat. I used to think it was a demon. I know how that sounds. But when you're a kid, there are things you just know without proof. You don't question why your closet makes you nauseous or why the attic door feels like it's breathing. You just know something's wrong. And something was very wrong in that house. We moved in when I was 9. Old Victorian at the edge of a dead-end street. Sloped floors. Wallpaper like dry blood. My mom called it a fresh start. She'd just gotten serious with a new boyfriend, Rick. He helped pay for the place, but stayed in the city at first. So for a while, it was just me and her. The first night, I couldn't sleep. Normal new house stuff, I thought. Until I heard it. Knock. Just one. Soft. Like someone gently tapped their knuckle against my door. I sat up in bed, listening hard. Knock. 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 3 more. Spaced out. Deliberate. Then silence. I got up and opened the door. The hallway was empty. I asked my mom in the morning if she checked on me. She said no. She looked tired. Her hands were shaking when she poured her coffee. I noticed a red mark on her neck. She said it was a bug bite. That night, I stacked books against the door, just in case. The knocking came again. Same time, around 2 a.m. But this time it didn't stop. It turned into scraping, like nails dragging across the door. Then breathing, wet and slow, right up against the wood. I heard it say something I didn't understand. Too low, too garbled. And then I smelled it. Rot like something dead had been stuffed under the floorboards. I didn't sleep. Just stare at the door, flashlight clutched tight. In the morning, my mom had a bruise on her arm. Purple and angry, like someone had grabbed her too hard. She said she tripped on the stairs. She wouldn't meet my eyes when she said it. It kept happening. Some nights it tried the doorknob. Other nights, I'd hear it crawl across the hall. And once, I heard crying, soft, broken sobs like someone trying not to be heard. Sometimes it came for me. Sometimes it didn't. But someone always got hurt. The worst was when I forgot to block the door. I was half asleep when I heard the slow creak of it opening. I froze, pulled the covers over my head. Something stepped into the room. It didn't walk right, too heavy, too slow. The mattress dipped beside me, and it breathed, right on my face. Hot, sour, and wrong. Then, finally it left. In the morning, I had scratches across my back. Through my shirt. I didn't tell my mom. She already looked like she was unraveling. Eventually, Rick moved in. Just showed up one day with his bags, and that looked like he belonged there all along. The weird part? The knocking stopped, but the house didn't feel safer. It felt worse, colder, heavier, and my mom seemed even more withdrawn. I started having dreams of something watching me from the hallway, tall and thin with no face, just a mouth full of too many teeth. Sometimes I woke up with bruises, sometimes with dirt under my nails. Once I woke up outside, lying on the porch, barefoot. My hands were bleeding. I told my mom we had to leave. She cried, said she'd find a way. That night, she locked her bedroom door, and I waited. 2:09 a.m. footsteps. They didn't stop outside my door this time. They kept going, toward hers. I heard her murmur something, confused, half asleep. Rick? Then a crash, and a scream, then silence. I ran to her room. The door was open just enough. Inside, in the dark, something was crouched over her. Tall. Wrong. It held her down, hands wrapped around her wrists. She was fighting, kicking, sobbing. And then it turned to me and grinned. I didn't think. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife I could find. When I came back, it was still on top of her. I screamed, ran forward, and drove the blade into its back. Again, and again, and again, until it slumped to the floor. My mom was screaming at me. I looked down. It wasn't a monster. No claws, no fangs. Just a man. Just Rick. His face was caved in. One eye open, one shut, lips split like someone had tried to tear the truth out of them. The police came, said it was self-defense, said I saved her, but she never looked at me again. We moved out of the house. She never spoke to me after that. Years later, I still don't sleep with the door open. I live alone now. 1-bedroom apartment. 3rd floor. No creaks, no attic, no shadows in the hallway. Still, last night, I woke up at 2:12 a.m. knock. Knock, knock, tap, and a voice behind the door. Not growling, not whispering, just tired. What? Edit. This morning I found something under my bed. My old flashlight. Cracked. The one I used to keep under my pillow. Still faintly glowing. And it smells like cigarette smoke. Story 7. I run a small YouTube channel, mostly focusing on scenic hikes and exploring off-the-beaten-path locations. It's usually just about appreciating nature, finding old ruins, that sort of thing. This time, I found something else. I need to write this down, partly to warn others, partly just to get it out of my head, though I doubt it'll ever truly leave. It started like any other day trip. I'd picked a lesser-known trail system in a fairly remote mountain range, hoping to get some unique footage. The initial hike was beautiful, strenuous, but rewarding. Sunlight dappled through the canopy, birds were chirping, the usual idyllic stuff. I pushed further than I usually would, drawn by the promise of a ridge view I'd seen on a very old, very unreliable map. By late afternoon, the clouds had started to roll in and the temperature dropped. I knew I should probably turn back, but I was deep in, and the thought of backtracking all that way was disheartening. I figured I'd press on a little more, then maybe find a quicker, if steeper, route down another face of the mountain if the weather turned really sour. That's when I first noticed the lack of trail markers. I'd been following what I thought was a faint game trail, but it had completely petered out. The woods here were dense, older, the kind where the undergrowth is sparse because so little light gets through. It was getting dim, and a prickle of unease started. I wasn't lost, not exactly. I have a good sense of direction, and my GPS was working, but I was definitely off any charted path. After another 20 minutes of careful navigation, pushing through some thickets of rhododendron, I stumbled into a small, unexpected clearing. And in the center of it stood a house. It wasn't a ruin, not like the crumbling stone foundations I sometimes film. This was a 2-story wooden house, clapboard style, with a porch and glass in most of the windows. It was old, clearly, paint peeling in places, a slight sag to the porch roof, but it looked intact. Maintained, almost. There was no driveway, no path leading to it that I could see, just the wild forest pressing in on all sides of this small, strangely manicured patch of land immediately around it. The grass in this yard-like area was short, almost like it had been recently cut, which was the first really odd thing. My YouTuber brain immediately kicked in. Abandoned house in the middle of nowhere? Content gold. I pulled out my camera, checked the battery, and started filming an intro talking about being off-trail, the unexpected find. Zauzual Spiel. I even made a joke about it being a horror movie setup. If only I'd known. The camera, though, seemed to be acting a little strangely from the get-go. The autofocus kept hunting, and there was a faint, almost imperceptible flicker on the preview screen that I put down to the low light. As I got closer, the strangeness amplified. The air around the house felt still, unnaturally so. The usual forest sounds, insects, rustling leaves, distant birds, seemed muted here, as if the clearing existed in a pocket of silence. The house itself, though weathered, was incredibly clean. No cobwebs in the corners of the porch eaves. The windows, though a bit grimy, weren't shattered or boarded up. The front door was closed, but not locked. I hesitated for a moment, a genuine flicker of should I, passing through me. But the lure of exploration, of capturing something unique for the channel, was too strong. I pushed the door open. It creaked, but not in a dramatic, spooky way. More like a door that hadn't been opened in a week or two. The smell that hit me wasn't dust and decay, which is what you expect from an abandoned place. It smelled faintly of lemon polish and old wood, a clean, almost domestic smell. I stepped inside, camera rolling, narrating my observations in a low voice. The interior was even more baffling. A small entryway led into a living room. There was furniture, a sofa, a couple of armchairs, a coffee table, a rag rug on the wooden floor. And it was all pristine. Not new, but impeccably clean. No dust on the coffee table. No grime on the upholstery, though it was faded and old-fashioned. It looked like someone had been there, tidying up, maybe an hour ago. When I checked the footage later, this section is a mess. It's grainy, oversaturated in weird patches, and the audio is filled with a low, warbling hum I swear I didn't hear at the time. You can barely make out what I'm saying. This is incredibly well preserved, I whispered, trying to keep the camera steady. Or not preserved. Lived in? But who would live out here, so far from everything? I moved through the ground floor. A dining room with a table and chairs, place settings still on the table, simple ceramic plates, cutlery. Again, spotless. A kitchen, small and dated, but the counters were wiped clean, no food out, no dirty dishes. Even a sink faucet gleamed faintly in the dim light, filtering through the window. It was deeply, profoundly unsettling. This wasn't abandonment. This was absence. Sudden absence. The camera seemed to really struggle in the kitchen. The footage shows strobing light effects and digital artifacts that obscure most of the details I remember so vividly. The feeling that the occupants had just left was overwhelming. Like they'd heard me approach and slipped out the back door, or were hiding upstairs listening. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" My voice sounded loud, intrusive in the quiet. Only silence answered. On the recording, my call is distorted, almost demonic sounding, followed by a burst of white noise. On the mantelpiece in the living room, and on a small side table, were framed photographs. I remember trying to zoom in with my camera. They showed a family, a man, mid-40s perhaps, with kind eyes and a receding hairline, a woman, a bit younger, with a warm smile and dark, wavy hair, and a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, with pigtails and a gap-toothed grin. They looked happy, normal. In one photo, they were standing in front of this very house, the man with his arm around the woman, the girl holding a flower. The footage of these photos is useless. Blurry, pixelated messes where the faces should be, as if the camera refused to capture them clearly. I only have my memory of their smiles. Okay, so people definitely lived here, I murmured, frustrated with the camera's apparent inability to focus. But where are they? And why is this place so immaculate? A knot of anxiety was tightening in my stomach. This wasn't fun, adventurous exploration anymore. This felt wrong. The cleanliness was illogical. A house this remote, left unattended for even a short while, would show signs of nature reclaiming it, or at least the dust of disuse. This felt like a stage set, meticulously prepared, waiting. I decided to check upstairs. The stairs creaked under my weight, each step echoing in the silence. I kept my camera light on, sweeping it around, though the beam seemed weaker than usual and flickered. 2 bedrooms and a small bathroom. The first bedroom was clearly the parents'. A large double bed, neatly made, quilts smoothed down. A dresser, a wardrobe. On the nightstand, a pair of reading glasses lay next to a closed book. Again, no dust. It was as if someone had just stepped out. The footage here is almost entirely black, with occasional flashes of what might be furniture. The second bedroom was the child's. A small bed with a brightly colored patchwork quilt. A few stuffed animals arranged on a shelf, their button eyes seeming to watch me. A child's drawing was taped to the wall. A stick figure family under a yellow sun, standing beside a very large, very green tree. There was something almost disproportionate about the tree in the drawing, its trunk thick, its branches reaching over the family like protective arms, or encompassing ones. I tried to film the drawing, but the playback just shows a chaotic jumble of colors. My unease was growing into genuine fear. The silence, the order, the sense of recent, unexplained departure. It was all too much. I wasn't an investigator. I was a hiker with a camera that was rapidly becoming useless, and I was way out of my depth. It was in a master bedroom, on that dresser, tucked slightly under a small, tarnished silver jewelry box, that I found the note. It was a single sheet of folded paper, yellowed with age, but the ink was dark and clear to my eyes. It wasn't a letter in the traditional sense. It looked more like a page from a journal or a prayer. I picked it up, my fingers trembling slightly, and unfolded it. I tried to film it as I read. The handwriting was neat, masculine, possibly the father's from the photos. My memory of the words is seared into me, but the footage, it's a complete wash. Static, scrolling bars of color, and a high-pitched whine that makes my teeth ache to listen to. I can only recall what I read, what I saw with my own eyes, The hunger is great today. It whispers through the roots, through the floorboards. We offer what we can. We are grateful for its shade, for its enduring presence. It was here before us. It'll be here after. The little one is strong. She feels it more keenly now. This is good. The communion must be complete for her to truly flourish under its boughs. It demands patience. It demands faith. The growth provides. The growth takes. We give ourselves to the growth so that we may become part of its eternity. It asks for stillness, for quiet nourishment. We must be still. We must be silent. Soon, we will all be rooted, unchanging, forever part of its design. Blessed be the growth. May its reach extend. May its thirst be quenched. A cold dread washed over me, so intense it made me feel nauseous. The growth. When God's name was the growth. The tree and the child's drawing flashed in my mind, oversized, dominant. The language of the note, hunger, whispers through the roots, communion, rooted. It was deeply disturbing. This wasn't a quaint, abandoned farmhouse. This was something else, something sinister. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, oppressive. I could hear my own breathing, loud and ragged in my ears. The feeling of being watched intensified, not by human eyes, but by something pervasive. The house itself felt like it was holding its breath. Okay, I'm done. I'm getting out of here, I said, my voice shaky. The camera, I realized, had stopped recording on its own. The little red light was off. I fumbled to turn it back on, a fresh wave of panic rising. This is too much. This place. I need to leave. I backed out of the bedroom, not wanting to turn my back on the empty space. I practically ran down the stairs, the creaks now sounding like accusations. I didn't bother looking around anymore, just headed straight for the front door, jabbing at the record button on my camera, hoping it would work. My hand was on the doorknob when I heard it, a faint sound from upstairs, a soft, almost sighing creak, like a floorboard settling, or someone shifting their weight. I didn't wait. I wrenched the door open and burst out onto the porch, then half jumped, half fell down the steps into the clearing. The fading daylight seemed dimmer than before, the shadows longer and deeper. I didn't look back at the house. I just aimed for the edge of the clearing, the point where I thought I'd entered, and plunged back into the trees, camera clutched in my hand, hoping it was capturing something. The relief of being out of that house was immense, but short-lived. The forest, which had seemed merely dense before, now felt menacing. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every rustle of leaves sounded like stealthy movement. The note about the growth and roots kept replaying in my mind. I glanced at the trees around me with a new, horrified suspicion. They were just trees, of course, weren't they? I pushed through the undergrowth, trying to get as much distance as possible between myself and that clearing. My heart was still hammering. I told myself it was just an old, creepy house, a family with some strange beliefs. Maybe they just moved on, hired someone to keep the place clean for some reason. But the note didn't fit any rational explanation. I must have gone 100 yards, maybe more, when I passed a particularly dense cluster of ancient-looking oaks, their branches gnarled and intertwined, forming a thick canopy even in the fading light. As I was pushing past the last of the tree line around the house's clearing, and then a sound stopped me dead. A voice, faint, weak, almost like the whisper of wind, but with a cadence that was unmistakably human. Help me! I froze. My blood ran cold. It was so soft, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. But then it came again, a little clearer, laden with desperation. Please help. It seemed to be coming from my left, from deeper within that same cluster of old trees I was just passing. Against every instinct screaming at me to run, some morbid curiosity, or perhaps a deeply buried sense of obligation, made me turn. My camera was still in my hand. I pointed it blindly, desperately hoping to capture whatever this was. I took a few hesitant steps towards the sound, peering into the gloomy tangle of trunks and low-hanging branches. "Hello," I called out, my voice a mere croak. "Here, please." The voice replied a little stronger, guiding me. And then I saw it, or rather, her. It was one of the large oaks, its trunk thicker than any I'd seen that day, ancient and deeply fissured. Infused into it, as if the tree had grown around her, or she had grown into it, was a woman. My mind simply refused to process it for a second. It was the woman from the photographs in the house. Her dark, wavy hair was matted and streaked with something that looked like moss. Her face, pale and drawn, was turned towards me, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and a horrifying, resigned emptiness. Her skin, where it was visible, had a strange, bark-like texture, dry and discolored, blending almost seamlessly with the wood of the tree. Her arms were not visible, nor her lower body. They seemed to have been entirely consumed, incorporated into the vast trunk. Only her torso, shoulders, and head were distinguishable, yet even these were deeply embedded. She looked drained, changed. I let out a small, choked gasp. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Her lips, cracked and pale, moved. "Help me, please." Her voice was a dry rustle, like dead leaves. I finally found my voice, though it was trembling uncontrollably. What happened to you? Who did this?" A flicker of something unreadable passed through her eyes. "The growth that it took us. It keeps us. Nourishment." The words were halting, weak. Each one seemed an immense effort. "The family. Your husband? Your daughter?" I managed to ask, the images from the photos, however vague in my memory of the actual prints, sear in my mind. Her gaze shifted slightly, as if looking past me or through me. "He welcomed it. He brought it to us. He's rooted deep. He sleeps now." A tear, thick and slow like sap, welled in her. I traced a path down her bark-like cheek. "My daughter, she's still aware. It wants her fresh. Please, you have to help her." "Help her? How? Where is she?" I stammered, my mind reeling, trying to comprehend the impossible horror before me. How could I help? What could I possibly do against this? The woman's eyes darted frantically, not at me, but somewhere behind me, back towards the direction of the house, or perhaps just into the deeper woods. Her breath hitched. It's coming." "Who? What's coming?" I whispered, a primal fear seizing me. I didn't dare turn around. Suddenly, I heard it. Faint at first. The sound of soft, deliberate steps on the forest floor behind me. Twigs snapping gently. Leaves rustling, not by wind, but by passage. My skin crawled. The sound was unhurried, almost casual, which made it all the more terrifying. The woman in the tree saw the terror on my face, or perhaps she heard it too, more acutely. Her eyes, already wide, stretched impossibly wider. A raw, guttural sound tore from her throat, no longer just a plea for help, but a scream of pure, unadulterated terror. "No, please, stop," she shrieked, her gaze locked on whatever was approaching behind me. "Leave him. Don't let IT." Her voice cut off, gurgling. I didn't wait to see what it was. I didn't look back. That scream, that final, desperate stop, aimed not at me, but at whatever was behind me, shattered the last of my horrified paralysis. I ran. I've never run like that in my life. Blind panic fueled me. Branches whipped at my face, roots threatened to trip me, but I didn't care. I just ran, lungs burning, heart feeling like it would explode from my chest. The sounds of pursuit, whether real or imagined, I don't know. I think I heard those soft steps for a while, keeping pace, or maybe it was just the blood pounding in my ears. I didn't dare to check. The woman's scream, her changed face, the father's note about the growth, it all swirled into a nightmare montage in my head. I ran in what I hoped was the general direction of the main trail, back towards where I'd left my car. I have no idea how long I ran. It felt like an eternity, every shadow a threat, every sound a pursuer. I didn't stop, didn't slow, just kept pushing, stumbling, scrambling through the dense woods. The light was almost completely gone now. The forest plunged into deep twilight. Finally, through sheer dumb luck or some ingrained navigational instinct, I burst out of the trees onto something familiar, the switchback of the trail I'd been on hours earlier. I've never been so relieved to see a marked path. I still didn't stop running. I practically flew down the trail, my hiking poles still strapped to my pack, clattering uselessly. It must have been another hour, maybe more, of this desperate flight before I finally reached the trailhead, the small gravel parking lot where my car was. It was the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen. I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking so violently I could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I slammed it into reverse, spun the car around, and sped out of there, gravel spraying behind me. I didn't look in my rearview mirror until I was miles away on the main highway. I drove straight home, a multi-hour drive without stopping. I didn't even realize I still had the camera clutched in my hand until I was unlocking my front door. Later, with a sickening sense of dread, I tried to check the SD card. It was almost entirely corrupted. The files were there, but they were unplayable, full of digital noise, static, blocks of distorted color, and horrifying, garbled audio. There are moments, tiny fractions of seconds, where I think I can make out a shape, a distorted sound that might be a word, but nothing concrete. Nothing to prove what I saw in that house, what I read in that note, or the abomination I encountered by that tree. It's all gone, lost to some kind of digital decay I can't explain. It's as if the place itself, or whatever resides there, actively fought against being recorded. I haven't been able to sleep properly since. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face fused into that tree. I hear her voice, begging for help, then screaming. The growth. What was it? Some kind of sentient, parasitic plant entity? A local deity they worshipped until it consumed them? And what was coming for me? The father, rooted deep but somehow mobile? Or the growth itself? The lack of any footage makes it worse. Somehow. It's just my word, my fractured memory against the silence. Sometimes I even start to doubt myself, to wonder if the stress and the isolation of being off trail made me imagine the worst of it. But then I remember the cold dread, the smell of lemon polish, the feel of that note in my hands, and the sheer, primal terror of that final scream. No, it was real. I haven't gone back to those woods. I don't think I'll ever go hiking alone in a remote area again. That's it for today's creepy Reddit tales. Before we go, I just want to say a quick thanks to all of you for watching, liking, and sticking around. You guys keep this channel going, and I'll be back soon with more stories that'll make your skin crawl. Drop a comment if you've got your own spooky tale to share, and I'll see you in the next one.